afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the October 21st, 2015 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of IgniteCDA, Coeur d'Alene's Urban Renewal Agency. Let's stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Justin, would you lead us in that?
Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Welcome, everyone. The first item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment? Mr. Lyons.
Good afternoon. My name is David Lyons. I live in Midtown. As you know, your agency is subject to the Idaho Open Meeting Law. That law states in its first section, quote, "The legislature finds and declares that it is the policy of this state that the formation of public policy is public business and shall not be conducted in secret," unquote. The law requires that your agency's meetings be open to the public with advance notice, an agenda, and written minutes of what happened. The law applies not just to meetings where decisions are made, but to all meetings where there is any discussion that may lead to a decision. The law has been interpreted, however, to apply only when a quorum, a majority of agency members is present. Your agency has 9 members, so that means 5. Your agency exploits this quorum requirement to evade the open meeting law by setting up committees which always have fewer than 5 members, and by keeping meaningful discussions and de facto decisions in secret meetings of those committees. Then in public, this board goes through the motions of discussing what are usually largely already done deals. The Idaho Attorney General refers to this as crystallization of secret decisions in advance to a point just short of ceremonial acceptance. The Attorney General says the open meeting law's requirements, quote, "should not be evaded by holding smaller meetings with less than a quorum present." But that's exactly what you do. One recent example is a secret meeting of the Finance Committee arranged by Mr. Burns for August 27. Notice was given only to the 4 committee members, even though 3 important subjects were to be discussed: Midtown, the Smoot Tech Initiative, and the Park Ave area south of City Hall. I happened to find out about it through a records request concerning Midtown. So I sent another request asking for documents evidencing what was said and done at the meeting. Mr. Burns' response: "There are no such documents." In other words, this agency's most powerful committee met and discussed 3 important subjects, and there is not one scrap of paper to indicate what they said or did. We in Midtown have no idea what you powers said and decided about our neighborhood that day. And the Smoot Tech proposal was later sprung on everyone at this board's September meeting, leaving anyone who might disagree at an informational disadvantage to respond. Want to take a first step toward losing your well-deserved reputation for being as transparent as black tape? Open up these secret meetings of the Finance Committee and other committees. Open them up to the public. Let some sunlight in. But you won't, because you love doing things in secret. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Any other public comment? Okay, next item would be approval of the minutes.
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion to approve the minutes of September 16th, 2015. Any discussion, comments, or corrections? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is a presentation on the Four Corner Master Plan. Steve Anthony, Gordon Dobler, and Phil Boyd. Welcome. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. three of us will be working together here. Phil will be putting on the majority of the presentation, and Gordon's here to answer questions, but I'm kind of here to the part to give you a little bit of history of our project. What we're presenting to you today is we feel is a great opportunity for the city and Ignite to work together. I've personally been able to work with the Ignite board on, I think, on some great projects. When we look at McEwen, our art down in the higher educational corridor, that we've partnered together on those, and I think to the public's benefits, those have all been very popular projects. And those are just a few among many. This, we believe, again, will kind of be another kind of opening for the city for our people coming in. This is our, what people think is when you get to Coeur d'Alene, you get that Northwest Boulevard, Sherman area, and you're entering the downtown area. What this project worked its way out of is the city is working with the BLM to acquire the 18 acres for the BLM lease there right away. And at the time, the council asked our steering committee to also look at the four corners. We did have two Ignite members on that steering committee. In going through the public meetings, we heard loud and clear that we spent a lot of time on the four corners, almost more than the BLM. But I am happy to report our BLM documents are ready to be sent into the federal government in the next week for our application. On the four corners, though, at our public workshops, we heard quite a few comments on Mullen Avenue, whether to close it, open it, what size, and so we've met with several groups. We feel we've reached a compromise with the majority of the groups. Also, we heard loud and clear to preserve Memorial Field. We feel Mullen Avenue is the key to the BLM property to start that project by softening the avenue. Also a key of preserving and saving Memorial and make it a more useful facility and restore some of the heritage of that. So we're here mainly to ask for the partnership with Ignite and the City of Coeur d'Alene, but to give you a little bit more in depth into what the project would actually be. And Phil wanted to come up and make the presentation, and then Gordon and I are here to answer any questions from the city side.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Phil.
I'm Phil Boyd with Welch Comer Engineers. I guess Jeff, can the screen come back on? There'll be some sort of mouse. It's my job. Thank you. That voice comes. That's excellent. Okay, as Steve said, we'll talk about the Mullen Road project. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail to talk about how the concept went to project. The mayor's already seen this last night, so I'm going to speed through it so he doesn't have to see it twice. Obviously, you guys understand that picture, and it shows the undeveloped area. Here is Northwest Boulevard and Mullen Road and the grandstands. And this is gravel parking, a little bit of striping on it. One of the things, the driving technical part of this is that the traffic has substantially reduced in this area since the education corridor improvements went in. In these lanes, it's decreased 50%. And literally the lanes that exist there now, the 5 lanes, are no longer necessary from a traffic standpoint. So that was in the back of everyone's mind as we were working through the Four Corners BLM process, the master planning. Also paramount is this pedestrian crossing, and I don't need to explain to most of you the dangers associated with that crossing because you've all probably seen it. In the big context, and Steve alluded to this about why Mullen Road first. Why would that be kind of a first project request for the city right out of the chute? And you can see all the proposed improvements on the BLM corridor, which starts about right here and heads that direction, and in the Memorial Field area. And here at Memorial Field, you see it's reoriented, includes a soccer field, which could be a partnership project potentially with NIC, the skate park, futsal courts, another active recreation area here, and parking to service that, picnic shelter, kids' playground. All of those facilities will generate more people moving across Mullen Road, including that parking area. And so Mullen Road becomes kind of a cornerstone project. This is the concept that was presented at our final public meeting. Part of the reason I want to show these is to demonstrate the feedback we received throughout the process and how the steering committee and the city modified the design, the concept design in response to the things that we heard from the community. Kind of two key ones is one down here, you see the what we call the Park Drive parking lot, and then the other one would be the absence of the carousel in that location. As we move forward, this is the City Council workshop. You can see that the carousel appears kind of generally located here. This parking lot is still in there. We get some feedback from the community. No trees should be removed from City Park. Mullen Road should be the through street and not Park Drive. Remove the Park Drive parking lot and provide traffic facilities to allow Mullen to be temporarily closed. Because if you guys might remember during the master plan process, if you had attended to the open house, we had a Mullen closed option, just get rid of Mullen completely and just connect the two parks, or the Mullen open option. And it felt like there was about a 50-50 split between the community. 50% wanted it closed, 50% wanted it open. The city really needs the opportunity to be able to close that portion of the road during peak events, and think Ironman, Taste of the Coeur d'Alene's, 4th of July, because there's so much pedestrian movement through that area. So took this criteria from the public and developed a new concept. This is an overview. You can see Mullen Road comes in. There's these two circular areas. I'll explain a little bit more and blow up these areas so you can see closer. Another circular area. You'll notice the parking lot is gone in this area. And there's a parking lot a little more defined over here, and some green space, and green space around it. A little closer look at it, and then I'll zoom in on this part here. So Northwest Boulevard, you can see that instead of a 5-lane road, we still retain, we combine 2 lanes, so the left turn and the through are combined now, and we keep the drop right, because if you remember from an earlier slide, the drop right still has about the same amount of traffic that it historically has had. We've lined up the 2 approaches to the parking on the north and the south here, because this is the old approach right here, and I think you guys have all probably seen how cumbersome that is, and if you get some stacking in here, it blocks the exit there. This provides a little bit more stacking. And you can see here this circular area, and the reason that we put these in is the closure mechanisms would be right at the top of this area right here between the blue and the red, and they would just be a series of manual bollards that when the city elects to close the street, they would pull the bollards out of the ground. There would be some signage that's activated at the streets up here and over on Park Drive that says Mullen Road is closed, no outlet. There'd be some language, but it's still somebody's going to come in here and head this direction, and you want to give them the opportunity to say, oh gosh, the street is closed, I can't get through there, I'll circle around and go back out, and then I'll find some parking here. This also serves as the opportunity to access the city's park facility here, as well as when you have events, you still need to get vehicles into the city park for Taste of the Coeur d'Alene's and Ironman. And that similar feature exists on the other side right here. In this area, you can see the road exists here now. We're pushing it slightly into the park, but no trees are removed from City Park. We are spading that one out right there and moving it to a little different location right here because it's too close to the roadway there. This is a speed table. Really, it's just designed here to provide a more natural transition. You don't have to step off of a curb as people move through over to what we call Memorial Plaza here. And you can see that we've added a sidewalk here and added a sidewalk to the restroom here, because those are going to be paths that people traditionally use those paths now. We're just providing a hard walking surface. All the things that you're seeing up on the screen here are part of the funding that Gordon will talk about a little bit later. And I'll show you some additional renderings that Del Hatch put together for us. I should have also said earlier, if you guys have a question while I'm going along, don't hesitate to stop me. Moving to the west, the parking lot that was removed here, there was still a strong sense that we had as designers that some element of parking was important here. One, we're removing, by this design of the road, we're removing parallel parking, which is about 17 or 18 functional spaces that exist on Mullen Road now, and we're putting 17 back here. And these are really ideal spaces for people to park here and get to Fort Sherman, especially if you have young kids or picnic baskets or whatnot in here. And you can see now in this design, Mullen Road continues to be the through street. Park Drive comes up in this and is a stop condition. A little bit further to the northwest here, currently there's parking along here for the neighborhood, permit parking for the neighborhood residents, and we've replaced that right here. So that's a dash white line, and if you have a permit, you would be able to pull in here and park here and, you know, walk across that. And again, it's just shown as grass here, but maybe there's an extension of that sidewalk out there. This, I should have prefaced this, and you guys probably saw the text over here, that these were the images that were presented at the Fort Ground Homeowners Association meeting that the mayor organized at the Little Red Church to brief them on impacts to their community and or neighborhood and talk about things that they had been concerned about. Subsequent to that meeting, and some other parallel events were going on. One was the carousel. That had been kind of working its way through the city's process of Parks and Rec Commission. And so at a point in the process, we were asked to show it in this design, but move it a little further east. I'll put this note in here respecting the city utility setbacks. The cities have minimum utility setbacks, and there's quite a number of utilities that move through that area, so we kind of located it where it fit. Also show an area for the Workers' Memorial, which has previously been shown, and then include the alternate to expand memorial field parking to just get a higher parking count. So that's where this concept came from. You guys kind of recognize much of it here. This was the original parking area, and we expanded it that direction. There's 144 spaces there, but we got some direction last night from City Council to save as many trees as possible. So there might be 140 spots when we're finished, because there's some trees right in this area we could save by eliminating a couple of parking spots there. You can see that the carousel is situated in here, and the Workers' Memorial is down here in the bottom left. And again, it's a placeholder. I think you all know that this project has made its way through the city's process and received council approval. This Workers' Memorial still needs to make its way through the Parks and Rec process. There's the carousel. And this is the outcome of all the pretty drawings. This is the preliminary design, geometry, which we have made our way through, working with Gordon and his staff. And all the black lines you see here are essentially what the funding request is this afternoon, with the exception of course, there's no carousel funding for moving the building or anything in there for that. What this project would do is literally create like a commercial pad. If you can envision a commercial pad, the pad would be there. If the carousel doesn't do the things that they need to do, raise funds, it would be grass, and it would be a big grass area. So that's not part of the project. The trail up here, the commuter trail, is also not part of the project, and you'll see the funding later when Gordon comes up, that's broken out separately because I think Steve is encouraging some other funding sources to come forward with those things. So that is kind of the big picture part of it, and I can answer questions or turn it over to Gordon.
Brad.
Oh. Let me ask you a couple of questions. I'll hold off on a couple because they may come under Gordon. What you showed the slide where the museum is there. What happens, if and when the museum moves there? Would that just turn into park, or the building get used for something?
If at the HREI location or at the the current museum location?
Yeah. Did you show the museum? Was that the HR or the human rights?
Yeah, that's the HREI building right there.
That's the okay. I wasn't sure which one it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that won't move then.
No, you can see that.
Is where the where those properties are on the other side of Memorial Field that are owned by the Urban Renewal Agency, Ignite. is that land needed for anything, or is that pretty much how it's, yeah, that little triangle there, isn't that the houses that are under ownership?
That's correct. This,
Is that
and
needed for anything, or is this the final plan, and then those are kind of standalone for something?
I'll give you the direction we received when we started on the master plan project is that the URA property here was not in play as part of the master planning because the board had not concluded on what they were going to use this for.
Right.
So you can see we've planned around it.
Right. Right, just checking.
Yep.
Deanna.
Phil Boyd, can you tell me what the Workers' Memorial is, please?
I can show you a kind of a placeholder of it, but we do not have a detailed design of it. That is the placeholder, and it's literally just a conceptual sketch that Del Hatch put together of an approximate size, and as I mentioned earlier, that has not made its way through the city process. And I anticipate it would involve something that the Workers' Memorial Group would come to see Steve with a concept, and it would work its way through Parks and Rec and on its way up to council.
I got one other question while you've got that slide.
Let's go to Dave first.
Oh, I'm
He was-
sorry.
Phil, Memorial Plaza Gateway entrance, can you elaborate on that?
I can. That also is a placeholder, and I can't zoom in on this, but you can see there and there. There's two large foundations, and I think what Dell was envisioning is a gateway feature here of some artistic type. So as you're coming across this way, you have a little bit of an entry feature shown into the Memorial Plaza area here and the Memorial Field area. That is pulled out as a separate ad alternate because as we were working through the budget and Steve and Gordon kind of concluded that probably should not be in the base project cost, or at least the initial request.
Brad.
Oh.
Excuse me.
Hey, where you put the angle park, I guess it's not angle parking, but where you put the parking in that you said was over by the Fort Sherman. So I assume when there's a big holiday weekend going on, you have the bollards in and have the traffic blocked on Mullen, you could still come the other way into Mullen to access that parking lot, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, the bollards on this end, and I should have pointed that out,
Right.
are right here. And
Well, I thought it was where you had the turnaround, so you could, if you saw the bollards, you could, is it at that end of the turnaround or the?
It's on
it's
the
on
other end.
both ends.
Both
Yeah, it's
ends,
on
okay.
both ends.
I see how you're doing it.
Yep,
Okay.
there's a set here and a set here.
Okay.
And so if you
So
came
both
in,
those would stay open then?
correct, and if you couldn't find a parking spot, you'd come into here and turn
Right,
around and
okay.
exit.
All right. Thanks.
So I have a question, Phil. Could you go back to the slide that shows the triangle of IgniteCDA properties?
Yes.
So what's the red area just to the north of the memorial, the field?
This here,
Yeah,
that's the proposed skate park.
skate park. Okay.
And this is a ropes and ladders course, or ropes and boulders course, a futsal, and then parking.
So what's a futsal court?
The mayor is the authority on futsal.
All right, maybe I should ask you, Steve.
Futsal is like a 3-on-3 soccer. It's a very reduced
Yeah.
soccer field. It's, you can have basketball pickup games where you can have 2-on-2. Rarely do you have 11-on-11 for soccer, right? So this is basically a miniature soccer.
I have heard of that, okay. So at our one of our last meetings, we had some consultants talk to us about what to do with that triangle, and although no decisions have been made, one of the alternatives was to maybe square off our property a little bit with some sort of an exchange with the city, which might mean that our properties would be more extended further to the south. Oh boy, what direction? That southwest, southeast, and then we might give up a piece of that little top triangle. Has any of that been discussed in the parks, in the concept of all this, maybe moving things around? Does it help or does it hurt?
I guess I don't know that it would be a significant issue because is the skate parks, from what I understand from skate park design, there's a little bit of flexibility in those, and they can have unusual shapes to them. And I think that's part of the convenience of having that facility here is if this were to get squared off and maybe Garden Avenue, if I'm understanding you correctly, if this property were to get extended to this area and there was a land swap, I think you would be able to work that skate park around that.
Deanna?
Does this request include the trail along Northwest Boulevard?
It does not.
It does not.
It does not. I will go up to Gordon's slide here because it involves money and put that up there.
So the trail is not part of it, and you saw the pictures earlier. So to kind of sum up where we're at is the project that we're showing you today, our current base bid is 1.913, and if you have my staff report, I've identified that. City currently has $400,000 allocated to this, so our request is 1.6, and which comes out to 2, obviously, but the intent is the extra dollars could perhaps fund or partially fund some of these items down here. With the commuter trail, I think the intent is to approach Centennial Trail Committee or other sources to get them at least as partners, if not fund the whole thing.
Dave?
Thanks, Gordon. So as I understand, the $2 million really doesn't, or I shouldn't assume, what does the $2 million buy in the way of preparing for the carousel?
It basically gets everything built up to the footprint with any utilities, water, electricity that they need would be stubbed out, and they would take it from there.
So then the carousel raises their money and they get their operating fund and they do all that, they break ground. The budget that I've seen is around $410,000 that they have projected to meet that criteria. So when they pull that trigger, then the city is going to need to do $178,000 estimated further improvements to that pad to enable that building and stuff to be constructed.
I don't think that's the case.
No, and that's one of the, I'm going to skip to another drawing here. When we were putting together what we would call the ultimate design, there we go. Again, you can see this is the carousel. There's a sidewalk coming in here. You can see brick pavers there, and you can see this large patio and plaza area around it, and it has a picnic shelter in that location, a picnic shelter in that location, and it has quite an expansive plaza around it. That's what's estimated in the $178,000. I think from talking with Steve and the carousel folks, what's minimally necessary for the carousel to secure a building permit might include a sidewalk that goes from here to there and perhaps a sidewalk out the back and maybe a smaller apron area, which they would be, my understanding, responsible for. If the city someday wants to go add these features in, that would be the $178,000, including the trees and the picnic shelters and all those other things in there. But I think from what I understand, again, from Steve and the city, is that that's probably not in the cards at this point.
So whose budget's buying the appropriate benches and tables for people to sit down there? At what point does that get funded? In
the Memorial Plaza area or around the carousel?
Is it the city's expectation from the carousel folks that those amenities are part of their $350,000, or is it the carousel folks' expectation that that's part of the city's $178,000? Who's buying the stuff? Because there was a tendency to pull money out of the McEwen project by pulling those kind of items out of the plan to make it work, and then of course we didn't have enough benches and those type of consumer-friendly, user-friendly type of amenities. Who's buying the benches here?
That would be the city's responsibility. What we've told the carousel people is we would provide the pad for them, put it that they would be responsible once they get their plans, have their architect now, start designs, get his plans ready, what the square footage needs for that, and then it would go through our, to apply for a building permit, which we would then do a DRT meeting. Then from DRT, whatever is required of the carousel to be able to open up and operate as far as sidewalks, things like that would be the total responsibility of the Carousel Foundation. As far as the picnic shelters, things like that, those would not have anything to do with the carousel. Those would belong to the city. The city would rent those out. So if kids wanted to come down and ride the carousel, they would rent the picnic shelters and pay the city that amount, not the Carousel Foundation. Those would be under city ownership in the benches. So those would be city responsibility then.
Okay.
So Phil, could you go back and just outline again the boundaries of the project? Because it's street and plaza area, right? So I just want to understand what's included within the project.
So the black lines that you see up here, and we'll start at the Memorial Plaza area here. This Memorial Plaza area is included in the project. That sidewalk is. This parking lot is included. The commuter trail, which we broke into two pieces, we call this the commuter trail south, which is that piece, and then the commuter trail north, which is the one that extends up to Garden Avenue. And you can see in that estimate I showed earlier, they're broken out as two separate pay items. Those are not included in the $1,913,000. The Mullen Road improvements, these parking improvements over here, all of the improvements through this area, into Park Drive here, including the stormwater improvements, and over into this area. So and I'll go to this picture. You can see the several trees that are in this area and the patterning in the concrete in here. Those are also included. I think, as you guys know, at this level, we've got kind of a conceptual level estimate. We anticipate that we're just fine, but once you get into detailed design, if we find something over here, let's say in this parking area, a gigantic soft spot that needs to be excavated, that may impact the budget. And as Dave accurately mentioned, sometimes these other important features start to come out when you're working with a budget-driven project. And that's one of the things we talked about a lot at McEwen. When you set the budget, the scope has to change at times. Rarely do we get given a scope-driven project where there is no budget limitations. In fact, never. But I'm still young.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath. Tony.
Just a question for Steve and Gordon. Until today, I thought the city's contribution to this project was $450,000, but I heard you say it's $400,000 now. Is that correct?
I believe it always was $400,000.
Okay.
But we could have a bake sale or something, and I think, yeah, that was true. We had, I think the original project back in spring, the estimate was $1 million, and we had pulled in $400,000 of that. So, pretty sure, Tony. Yeah, yeah.
Brad
So-
and then Dave.
Okay, so Gordon, these preliminary budgets you showed us, does that pretty much get us outside of Memorial Field, kind of what's in the picture with Mullen Road and are the parking lots in that, or?
Yes.
So that's pretty much everything but Memorial Field, other than you've got the carousel and
In the carousel.
Yes. This area in here,
Yes.
the road, the parking lot, this area, not the Workers' Memorial.
yeah.
Yes.
So it's generally everything but the carousel building.
Itself, yes, uh-huh.
And then, how does Memorial Field fit into this? And maybe that's part of your presentation, and I'm jumping ahead, but are these things that could happen first, and then when there's funding for the revamped Memorial Field, that would get done? Does Memorial Field fit with this as it exists?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this would be the first step. A lot of this infrastructure is helpful to be in place before we move on to Memorial Field. So
Okay.
this is, the first step. And then Memorial Field comes later as funding becomes available.
Gordon, the $400,000 that the city's coming up with, that's primarily Parks Capital Improvement money, is it not?
Parks Capital and also Drainage Utility is participating because there's storm work that has to happen through here, some significant amount. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the team? Thank you for that. This is informational at this point. I will move to a decision at some point, perhaps next month. Give you a chance to consider it.
One thing, this might help a little bit, Brad, too, is if you know at Memorial now there's a present concession stand, so we would be looking with the Carousel Foundation to share that concession stand with the concessionaire so they could sell their tickets out of there, have concessions. So that's part of it, too, that for the plaza, for the carousel themselves, they would need their own ticket booth, wouldn't need that stuff. It would be able to share Memorial Field facility, the concession stand area there. So I think that helps. It helps to drive the improvements at Memorial.
One quick question while you're there, and if this is premature, just go ahead and tell me, but looking a little farther down the road after this is done and we're looking towards doing something to revamp Memorial Field there, do you have any rough guesstimate of what kind of dollars we're talking about for the Memorial Field upgrade, or is that nothing you can talk about right now? Just kind of thinking into the future here as I'm putting all the pieces together.
The way the plan's laid out, the Memorial Field grandstand itself can be revamped without turning the field, creating the soccer field. So it can almost be two projects. We can go in and revamp the grandstands, do everything that's needed for that. And if you saw the grand plan is to be able to turn the field so we can make it multi-use for soccer and softball, different activities. But as far as the grandstands and all the improvements there, that would be a separate project from the field. And so, our estimates are, I think Phil's got that up there.
This is an excerpt from the BLM Four Corners Master Plan. And we went through and estimated all these improvements. The scope is a little bit doubled up here a little bit, but you see this one that says Memorial Field and Plaza and Commuter Trail. So you can see the grandstands in the plaza, and then the play field. So the play field is $1,400,000.
And the grandstand was about 1.3.
Yeah.
1.39 and 1.4.
Yeah, and just to be clear on the play field includes, that's artificial turf as well as the soccer field. So it's not just putting back what's there now, and it resolves some of the topographic issues that exist out there now.
And then if we took this a step at a time like you're talking about and did the grandstand project, you can do the new grandstand and work with the field like it is right now, and it will also work when the field is realigned a little bit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's designed out that it could be in phases.
All right.
But Gordon, isn't some of that plaza cost and that 1.3 million there, that's going to be absorbed by the request right now,
Yes.
isn't it?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And to
Well, if I win the
clarify,
lottery, I'll help you.
there's no plan to raise the current Memorial Stadium, correct? You're just
No.
talking about renovating it
No,
and
just-
adding another element to the seating.
Correct, and I think what it is we've had letters together, the architectural, how it looks now is how it'll look. It won't change. What we do is most of the improvements would be in the infrastructure underneath, reopen. There used to be restrooms down there, showers, storage rooms, and we'd go in underneath. Some of us remember the restroom, go in and remodel those restrooms so they could be used for the people in the plaza. That would give restrooms on that side of Mullen Avenue, and so it's more just to, what we've heard loud and clear is to keep the historical integrity of the field. So it would look no different when you see it coming down Mullen Avenue or seeing it from Sherman Avenue. Look exactly, all the improvements will be in the infrastructure underneath.
You raised another question, Mr. Chairman, so I'm clear. We're not talking about building a new grandstand, but making
No.
it historic looking, so it has the flavor of the current grandstand. You're talking about just repairing the grandstand that's there right now?
Yes.
And that costs $1.3 million to repair what's there?
No, that included in this concept.
Yeah.
That included this additional grandstand in this area and a press box back in this area. And again, that was a kind of an idea. I think what Steve's talking about is just that piece right there.
Right. But even in the whole scope of things, that existing grandstand would still sit there even when the new one is built, and it would go along with the new one then?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if it had the structural integrity to do that. Okay, just wondering.
Any other questions of the team? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your information. We'll get back to you. So next we have a Celtice Way presentation, and that leaves Mr. Dobler up at the podium. Welcome again.
Thank you. Oh, here it is. I was going to pull up a picture while we talk. So, yeah, ask me later.
Ask you later.
Yeah. Let me see if I can remember how to do this. Celtice Way. I'm going to say it's,
Somewhere over there.
yeah, well, let's call it that for right now. All right, there's a general picture. So, some of you might remember we are currently partnered on the design of the Celtice Way project. We are in the federal ITIP program. We have about $300,000 of federal money available, and Ignite has partnered with us to have an additional $250,000. That, however, is just for the design of Celtice from Hutter, which is about right here, out to, well, technically out to Northwest, but really the majority of the construction would stop here at that Prairie, the old railroad bridge, which has been rebuilt. This project was reconstructed, but it lacks sidewalk and bike trails, bike lanes, rather. So that is included in the project that we submitted for federal funding. So here's the catch. We really don't have any construction dollars at all in the program. And in fact, we can't really even allocate any until we get to a certain design point, till we get a preliminary design approval, which we expect next summer. Even at that point, the construction dollars wouldn't be programmed for another 5 years. And what we've discussed with Glenn and what the commitment is right now is about $2 million 5 years out. And I know I'm throwing a fair amount of numbers at you, but the $2 million still leaves us about $3.5 million short of the total funds needed under a federal project. We estimate right now about $5.5 million if we did it under the federal guidelines using their money. And that's an important point I'll come back to in a minute. So, as you've also noticed, there's a lot of development that is happening and wants to happen along this corridor. So our council feels that this really is a higher priority for them for a couple of reasons. One of them is development is occurring now, and in 5 to 6, 7 years, whenever we might see those additional construction dollars, we'll be really behind the curve. So I think their feeling, and I agree, is that the infrastructure is lacking on this corridor, and if we could expedite that and bring it in ahead, it would really facilitate development. And you'll remember the participation in this Grand Mill signal when U.S. Bank came in, so that's a perfect example of the infrastructure facilitating growth along this corridor. The other thing that's driving the priority is our Atlas intersection. That's a high accident intersection for us, but it's a very expensive fix that would be taken care of with the project. For argument's sake, we could pull it out and isolate it, but it's got some tentacles, roots that reach out and touch the rest of the project. For example, in order to fix just this intersection, we have some significant grade issues that would have to be solved. See if I can zoom in. Nope, it's not going to let me zoom in. Anyway, some significant grade issues that would extend several hundred feet either way of that intersection. So it gets pricey pretty quick, and it makes more sense to fold it into the bigger project. So those are the two things that are driving really the priority with our council. So I'm here to say we think that with Ignite's participation, we could build this quicker and a lot cheaper. I explained to the council last night that federal projects come with a lot of trappings in all the way from design to the requirements, construction. Really, we have a 30 to 35% overhead on our projects just using federal grant money. And there's little pieces of that, but it's a staggering number. If we came out and funded this ourselves or without federal money, that's the savings that we would realize. So if we do fund it, we do it cheaper and we can do it sooner. So really, in short, we're here to see if there would be some interest on Ignite's part to really fund the construction. That number, at this point, our estimates is about $3.5 million. And I would put a little bit of a caveat on that to say there's still some design concepts that we haven't completely vetted, lighting, pedestrian crossings, that could, in the end, affect that number. But I think we're probably within 15-20% of the most of that number for the ultimate construction dollars.
And Gordon, the number again was $3.5 million?
$3.5 million.
So you're saving $2 million?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, wow is right, yeah.
Deanna?
And let me just add this to the info list. We are currently in currently in the selection process for the design consultant through the federal process. There's a bit of, I won't say urgency, but expediency that if we decide to partner, if Ignite decides this is something that is of value to them, we would probably pause a bit in that process because the design under the federal process is more expensive than the design without federal, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So Gordon, when I was on KMPO, one of the reasons we went ahead with the design process and funded it was so that we would be prepared in case something fell out and we'd be eligible for a grant. That obviously is, you're talking about that not working anymore, but KMPO did vote to make that one of the priority projects at that time, and they were planning to do the federal grant process work. As I recall, we were going to go through the grant process, which would be, they would come in and fund the majority of the project.
So all that is accurate.
That's all fallen out.
Well, the majority of the project right now, they have, without a firm commitment, they have penciled in $2.1 million in.
That's all that they have penciled in for it.
Correct. So in discussions with Glenn about, well, would more be forthcoming, the tune of 5.5 instead of 2.1.
So KMPO has basically changed their minds, which is the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization, of which the city is a part, has basically changed their minds about this being a priority project for them.
I think that, I don't know that I characterize it exactly like that. I think that as we've gotten as we develop the concept costs, the price has gone up from what they may have originally assumed. Those additional costs, I think, has caused them to say, I'm not sure that we can do that. And that's where we are at this point. So, funding the $5.5 million is up in the air. It begins to push up against the limit of their allocation. And you might remember, it's got to be vetted through the Urban Balancing Committee, and that dollar amount starts to become a little problematic. Not unsolvable, but questionable. So I'm not here to say that it would never happen, but I would say 5 years is the absolute soonest, and at that $5.5 million, more than likely a few years longer than that.
Dave?
Gordon, the impact of a lot of the rental properties and the development that's occurred along that corridor there, what has that done to the average daily traffic counts on Celtice and those intersections? And you're saying that the way it is now, it's, as we know, sitting at Atlas Road trying to get across at certain times of the day is nearly impossible. with the additional properties that are coming on stream along that corridor, at what point are we going to be approaching gridlock during some of the main commute times of the day?
So at Atlas intersection, we're there already. If you drive there any time after about 2 or 3 o'clock, you'll see that left turn starts to stack up, 10 cars in the fast lane. The other issue is, there's capacity focuses on the intersections. So we are starting right now to have issues with some of these pass-throughs that are being used as turnarounds. This annexation came in, and we're looking at issues of how do we get vehicles in and out of here. We have a master plan that shows Atlas is signalized, but we will probably need a second signalized access, because the master plan is to eliminate really anything but signalized, and with maybe 1 or 2 left turn onlys or right in, right outs, because through that median, any kind of a turn gets real problematic. You have no storage capacity. So it's kind of a long answer to your question, but the short one is we're there right now. We're struggling with, as each development comes on, how do we get access? And as you know, there's only 2 places that you can get from one side to the other without going through one of these, gravel pass-throughs, and that's Grand Mill and Atlas.
Just a follow-up on that point. So take us through, Gordon, what you can do when you work with developers like this newly annexed piece and some of the Atlas Mill that's yet to be sort of planned and developed. What can you do with the developer to require them to contribute to these kinds of costs?
We can. Yes, we can. And in fact, with this annexation, we did some of that, asking that they would contribute substantially to the development of that Atlas Road intersection. So we can put some of that on them as it comes through. The difficulty is a bit of master planning rather than having it on a case-by-case basis and trying to solve an issue. If you take a look at this right here, that's just isolated to this, our hands are a bit tied because we may really need to go out and reach out at a better location for a ped crossing or a second access. So that's the difficulty of having to address it on a first-come, first-served basis.
So I think I have a two-part question. One's probably to you, Gordon, and one's internally. As this would develop, is the ask for us to participate in what would fall within our URD boundary now, and then internally to us, how do we want to attack that or look at that, I guess, as a board and an organization? Because I believe a good extent of this project doesn't fall within our boundary at all. So I guess clarify the ask and then
Tony,
internally
discuss.
The boundaries?
Or Gordon?
I can address that. Yeah, it was actually a concern of mine right off the bat was, well, if I'm approach them to partner, what are their boundaries? Basically, all of this project is your boundary. Your boundary ends pretty close to the AIC, our area city impact, and yours pretty much coincide right about here.
Okay.
If I knew how to work this, I'm sure they're on a view here somewhere, but I'm not familiar enough with this map to pull them up. But I have, and your boundaries here. So
from your perspective, there's no additional pushing of the boundary that would be needed to facilitate this project?
No, but you bring up a good point, and thank you, because I meant to bring that up, that your funds can only be obviously expended in your boundary. So that could leave a portion of this last 1,000 feet that would not be addressed to Hutter. Don't know at this point that it would be included in the project. We would need to transition it, like I said, right in this area right here. I've approached Post Falls Highway District. At some point, they expressed interest in funding a future signal at Hutter when we talked about, through the federal project, but we never talked about any other road improvements that would need to take place up to a join point in this area. So I'm not sure that they would pick this up. We would certainly approach them if that's if that's where we end up.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense?
Yep.
Brad?
Okay, I might have a two-part question, but first, just briefly, what would change? Would this still be a divided highway, or would it be a 6-lane instead of a 4-lane, or just briefly? I mean, we don't have time to do the whole
No,
thing.
that's great.
I'm just
It would pretty
wondering
much
what the
be
plan
as you
is.
see it. So we're reconstructing the pavement. The old concrete is way past its service life. We'd be adding curbing, solving drainage problems. We would be adding commuter trails on both sides for pedestrian, bike lanes, buffered bike lanes on the inside for commuter bikes. We would be looking at signalization, at least at Atlas, potentially setting it up for some future signalization of this piece right here, and maybe even partnering with that developer, because they are currently coming forward. Looking at pedestrian crossings, particular in Grand Mill, with the development of all these apartments, there's a need for that. And potentially some lighting, which we don't have out there. So that pretty much captures what we'd be doing.
So it would stay a 4-lane divided highway like it is then?
Correct.
And maybe there would be some, in the meridian down the center, there'd be some center turn stacking lanes in there or things like that? Is that
Correct.
kind of the idea?
Yeah, some right-in, right-outs. Most of the pass-throughs would be at the signalized locations, though.
And are you planning on having to excavate the entire road, or can they, I suppose it doesn't work to crack the road bed and pave over it like they've done on some old freeways, or that doesn't work in this area maybe because you have to put new infrastructure under it, or is that?
So that is a potential,
Okay.
yes. We haven't got that specific yet.
All
We
right.
did look into it early on, so we could get, a rational cost estimate to go to the federal grant process, and it turns out that with a crack and seed, as you refer to, is about the same cost as just removal of the pavement.
Yeah, there's a lot of concrete out there.
Yeah, there is.
All right, and then so I guess the first thing is the design, some design money so it can get designed, and it's, I guess, shovel-ready, for lack of a better term, but
Correct.
is there any chance there'd be some state funding since they raised, the registration fees, and there's some more state funding, or I guess it's not is it still part of the business loop where it could come under the state or anything like that?
No, they gave it to us a
Okay.
while ago.
All right. So, and I guess the shovel-ready projects aren't like was done at Silver Lake Mall, aren't around anymore.
That was with the ARRA initiative. But there is, as Deanna pointed out, no, there is a lot of validity to get the thing designed and get it in the program, because over time, projects do fall out. And I think that's still, if we're under the federal program, that's still a valid approach. I would point out that we've been waiting for 2 years for an underfunding on the current Government Way project of about $1.3 million and still don't have that, and we're going to construction in 2017. So while it's a good plan, and there's no guarantee.
But Gordon, I think I heard you say that you had to decide, it's sort of a fork in the road, you got to decide if you're going to design it for the federal standards or
Yes.
not, right?
That's right, yes.
So you can't really have a design that's going to be sit on the shelf. If you don't do it to the federal standards, you're never going to qualify for that.
That's right. Once we go down that road, there probably would be no turning back. Well, or if we did, we would have to backtrack a bit on the design and, plus it up so it would meet the federal criteria, which, as you know, would be pretty inefficient.
Right.
So the cost, whether it's $3.5 million, $3.7 million, $3.8 million, the city has no money to contribute? Is that?
Well, so we don't have anything budgeted, and we have very little, just honestly. Right now, I think what we could do is anything in excess of the $250,000 that Ignite is committed for design, the city could pick up those costs. We were anticipating an additional $300 under the federal design. I think it would be less under a private design, but we could pick those up,
Sure.
whatever they would be.
I guess as a follow-up to Rod, I'm just curious about the money coming in a building permit for impact fees out there, and then Also, the money through the traffic impact ordinance, there's no funds there.
We have impact fees. Right now, they're allocated to other projects.
Okay.
15th Street, I can give you the list, but
All right.
yeah, they're allocated to projects the council has prioritized also. But, yeah.
Deanna?
And that's fact.
A question, if we designed the federal standards, expecting that potentially, if we have that design in place, the funding could potentially show up, what would be the difference between designing to federal standards and designing to standards where we would just bypass the feds completely? That was a federal highway, so it does have some
So the difference isn't in the actual design, ironically. It's in materials reports where you go through and you hire geotechnical engineers to do borings and get samples and fill out these elaborate reports and tests and studies. Environmental is much more involved than we would do on a city project. And there's several phases of the environmental. There's noise studies and those results. There's incorporation of whatever those requirements might be. So there's where we start to diverge on, what a normal city project would be and the lengths we would go to with the feds.
The federal government's good at studies, aren't they?
They love them, yes.
Yeah.
Gordon, so I understand there was some discussion last night at the council meeting about other sources of funding for this possibly becoming available. Are there any such sources that we haven't already discussed tonight?
I can enumerate them again, but I wouldn't use these sources in the same sentence as possible. But what I told the council last night, and you've identified one of them, we have impact fees, but they would have to be reprioritized, and basically other projects would have to be shelved. And even then, it would not be anywhere near the $3.5 million that we need, anywhere near that. And some of those dollars really for the next 2 years are already committed, so that gets a little problematic. LIDs, you can see from this, there are portions that are outside of the city that really could not be LID'd. So that leaves a gap in funding. A street bond, they could do a street bond if they were so inclined. And those are the main sources. There's always, car wash and bake sale, but.
Deanna?
I don't think I got an answer. You said they were very expensive tests, but do we have the numbers as to what the difference would be between designing to the federal standards, expecting federal money, as opposed to designing to our own standards?
So, if I understand the question, when we finish the product, the street looks the same. So it's got the same curb, the same pavement section, the same signals. Those plans, in essence, look the same. But how we got there costs a whole lot more money. And then construction costs a lot more money under federal.
When I look at this, are you talking about reconstructing back to Hutter?
Under the federal project, yes.
That would be under the federal, but it's already been, Mill River already did some work out there.
They did a little bit in here, yes. So right around the intersection, we would still need to add curbing through there, bike lanes, bike paths. The pavement itself a portion of it would not have to be reconstructed. That's correct. So did I answer your question?
I think so.
Just to explain a little bit further. So we get these plans, we go to construction. Well, the feds require us to hire a whole separate consultant to inspect and check the design consultants. They're out of the picture completely. So now we hire somebody else. Well, that's a lot more money than we would normally spend to have the consultant that designed it inspect it. On Government Way, the last project, we spent about $400,000 to hire another firm just to go out and take compaction testing and do all that, and then come in and process the construction paperwork. Any kind of, quantities, they submit quantities, and this outfit looks at it. Then they ship it to head. And believe me, I could go on for another half hour explaining, just the intricacies that end up costing dollars over and over that we get to skip. We don't do it if it's a city project.
Dave and then Brad.
Gordon, thanks for your patience with us.
Sure.
Clarify, $3.5 million goes from the railroad bridge to our western boundary,
Correct.
and the original project went all the way from Northwest Boulevard to Hutter. How much of that original project would be, if we were to compare apples to apples on your ask, how much would the project be if we were comparing the same stretch of real estate?
So let's back up. The project that we're asking you does go all the way to Northwest Boulevard. Again, there's a stretch of sidewalk in here under both projects that would remain.
Okay.
The bulk of the construction, though, is from the railroad bridge under the federal project out to Hutter, and under the project we're asking you for would be to your boundaries. There's about 1,000 feet that wouldn't get constructed. There is cost savings. That's why we brought it down, that we were able to, that's part of the $2 million difference in not really doing anything with that 1,000-foot stretch.
All the notes I see that pertain to Public Works and their discussion on this with you, they were talking about 3.5 and paring it down from 5.1, and there's 1,000 feet in there that was part of their original discussion, correct?
Correct.
So if we added that 1,000 feet, to give me an apples to apples with the savings part of it, I mean, we've talked about 35% because of the Davis-Bacon and all that sort of savings. What would the project, so I've got I guess a handle on what are we talking about if the city were to do it, the same project without the federal money that originally the KMPO and the federal money were talking about. How much of a real savings are we talking about if we compare apples to apples?
Yeah, if we were hypothetically asking to build the road all the way out to here.
Exactly, that extra 1,000 feet. The project's no longer a $3.5 million project.
Yeah,
it's something more.
Trying to do the math in my
Which brings
head.
us closer to what the entire scope cost was, but then we can now equate the actual savings of the hurry-up process would be.
For this last stretch, because there really aren't signals or anything, it would be on the order of $500,000 to maybe $700,000 for that last stretch.
Yes, that'd be about 4.1 to
somewhere in there.
4.3 would be the ask.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Brad.
Just two quick questions. Even though this is out of our district, just out of curiosity, what's planned west of Hutter for that road?
So Hutter west of it is pretty much as it will be.
Okay.
The only thing that Post Falls and the Highway District have considered is some additional sidewalks. There's a connection to the Centennial Trail that floats in here somewhere, and I don't remember exactly where. It comes in from Ohio Match and makes its way down. So really just some window dressing, if you will. Not much.
Yeah, so not much. Probably be the same kind of similar building uses, some commercial, light industrial out there, and not a whole lot of improvements to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately, there would be a signal.
At Hutter, probably,
Yes,
yeah.
correct, at Hutter.
The only other thing, I don't know at what point, but I'd be curious at some point to know what the city council thinks about this project and about participation in by Ignite Coeur d'Alene. So I guess we can discuss that whenever. I just like to know how we're, what the council is thinking on it.
Well, my understanding is the council took it up last night, correct?
Yes. Yeah, council took it up, and we had pretty much this same discussion, and as I said, it's coming up in a priority to them for the reason that we discussed, and feel that it needs to be expedited if that's possible. So.
Yeah, I got that. I'm kind of wondering about the funding, what the council is thinking about, partnering with Ignite or, doing the federal project and so forth. And of course, one of our members is on the council, and so he could shed some light on it at some point. I'm just kind of curious because I think we need to be aligned, and and work together. And I'm just curious what the council thinks.
Gordon made the same presentation last night, and the council voted in favor to move forward with the ask to Ignite. If they didn't believe that the project should be expedited, they wouldn't have gone to this step. So it does have council support to move forward, and that's why Gordon's here today.
Sure. The ask for Ignite is directed by the council.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't get into specifics about if it wasn't the full $3.5 million, if it was something less, where would we come up with the money? But in my conversations with the Public Works Committee, I basically told them what I told you, was that really the only, I would say, reasonable, feasible source of funds would be impact fees, and the council would have to go back in and basically pull projects out that have been on the plan for some time to contribute more funds. So it's kind of an indirect answer, but that's kind of the bottom line to what I think you were asking.
Well, I guess I was asking about two kinds of impact fees. There's the kind that you pay at building permit for new construction, and then a lot of these, these high-traffic commercial developments will trip the traffic impact ordinance, and which is kind of a different. Isn't that a different pot of impact fees? I was curious
well, the
about
impact
that.
fees we collect at building permits are the ones that go into the, into the impact fee fund that we spend. Specific fixes with developments, those don't really make it into any discretionary fund by the city. Those are spent, like this Grand Mill signal, those are spent on that particular project, and there really isn't any funding available from that. It just, the developer uses those to build whatever improvements are necessary.
Last question.
David.
Is the city agreeable? Let's say we work out and support a funding option here. Then as future properties get annexed in, would there be any potential for this entity to get reimbursed, since we're basically being asked to be the bank on the whole thing? Or would that money be allocated into other parts of this that aren't being funded by this particular request? I don't know if that's an open-ended deal. Have
When
you ever
say
done that
potential,
before?
I don't know that we've ever reimbursed out of future revenues from impact fees. In fact, I'm not sure one way or the other if legally we could do that. I know we've had some discussions along those lines over the years. So frankly, I don't know the answer to that.
It sounds kind of like a hybrid latecomer agreement.
Yeah.
That's illegal?
Latecomer fees ordinances exist. I think cities are a little bit loath to actually use them sometimes because they're kind of hard to administer, I guess. But
I guess probably this has to run through finance. I don't know what funding we have available and so forth. I guess you need some direction on this, or
again, this is informational tonight.
Yeah, right.
And I think we need to take some time to consider it and figure out if it's something that we should be doing.
So it should probably work through finance and go through.
Well, I think we
process.
have, we've heard, I think Rod could address this, but I think the revenue's probably there. It's not so much the revenue. We might, I don't know whether we'd have to borrow for it, bond for it.
It's like we've talked about a lot of things. It's more about choices.
Right.
As far as if you do this, now you have this much cash and something else could come up where you may need to borrow money, or you could even borrow money to fund this. But I think, as Denny said, this is just informational tonight, so we have an idea of the dollars because this is new to us. And then we can go back and look at our financials and kind of do the work on how much we allocate and, if any, all, part, none, don't know. And then the choices where you might have other things going on. But it is an important part of that district for sure. So.
Right. That's all I'm asking. We're not even at the point we can make a decision right now because we don't know, what the choices are and what money is available and plus our other projects. So that's why I'm just asking if this should probably go through the process the next several months. And
Chairman, I might just
Mr.
add
Mayor.
that the ask, Gordon, would probably not be until the next budget year for Ignite.
That's correct.
So we're not talking about something that would come out of this budget year. It would be the following budget year.
Okay.
We have a better understanding of the total cost by that point in time? Would it be?
Probably would, actually. We probably would, well, I guess I would have to decide on how we're going to proceed, because if we hire a design consultant and launch them on a federal-based project, we would have to go down that road. Either way, I would say by spring, late spring, early summer, we would have a better idea of cost estimate.
Okay. So we've had a request for a break. So let's break for 10 minutes. We could be back at 5:27, roughly. Thanks.
We've never had an intermission.
Back from a break. Next item on the agenda is finance report. Commissioner Caldwell.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we'll start with the Lake District. As we typically do, I'd like to start with the balance sheet first. During the month, the district did have a decrease in cash of $142,241. That was primarily a result of previously approved payments that we made. First one is to the City Public Arts Commission, $88,812. The Downtown Sidewalks ADA initiative of $12,934. And the second half of our payment to the Downtown Association grant of $21,875. The rest of the assets were pretty static for the month, not much change of any consequence. On the liability side, we did have a decrease in our total liabilities of $8,722 as it relates to our mortgages and notes payable, and that's totally a function of our monthly payments that we make each month. Next, if you could go to the profit and loss statement, again for the Lake District. Starting at the top, you will see that we did receive tax increment revenue during the month of $22,713. We had rental income from our properties of $11,322. A little bit of interest income of $450, a couple of miscellaneous items, and the total revenue for the month of $34,672. On the expense side, the significant items, I guess I would say, would be the professional services was higher than typical, and that was to pay Miller Stoffer and Architects West $4,850 and $5,241 for their work on analyzing our assets, and then also an appraisal evaluation for the railroad right-of-way of $2,500. You go a little bit farther down the list and you will see the grant program line item of $12,934, which was paid for the Sidewalks Downtown Initiative. And then a little bit farther down, you'll see that in the communication line item, we had a 50-50 split between the Lake and the River District on expense we pay there. It's about halfway down the page of $6,828. So you end up with total expenditures for the month of $79,727 for a net loss of cash during the month as far as expenses compared with income, $45,055. Are there any questions on the Lake District before we move to the River District? Seeing none, I'd like to move to the River District next, and we will, as we do on the other district, let's start with the balance sheet. The River District did have a decrease in cash during the month of $54,545, and a large amount of that decrease was a result of us transferring funds to the City Public Arts Commission of $41,450. $44. The liability side of the balance sheet, there's really nothing to report there of any significance. As we mentioned before, the activity in the River District is usually quite a bit less than the Lake District. If you could move to the profit and loss statement, again for the River District, you'll see that we did receive tax increment revenue during the month of $4,893. We had some interest income of $422 for total income of $5,315. On our expense items, the River District did have an expense in communication, much like the other district where we split it, about halfway down the page, and that amount is $6,827. So you go to the very bottom, you'll see expenditures of $18,914 as compared with our revenue of $5,315. So not a whole lot of activity in the River District for the month. Are there any questions on the balance sheet or the profit and loss for the river? Yes, yeah.
I just have a question. Tony, we've had a number of public record requests, and I see here that we've had to run some through our legal counsel at a cost of $459. Do we track at all time that it takes? I know the initial public records process that we went through when I was on the council, excessive requests or extra long requests, we were able to charge for those. Are we able to do that or not?
Yes, anything that exceeds 2 hours of staff time is open for charging to the requester, as well as any copies over 100 pages. And I work closely with our legal counsel on those requests.
Okay. So there is a cost involved in that process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go to the payables list that Tony has just passed out? Seeing none, let's discuss the payables. The first item you'll see is Elam and Burke, General Counsel, and that's where you'll see some money spent on public records request, $154. The total for the month, and a large portion was the result of the tech marketing initiative we were looking at, is $4,368.50. Holly Troxel, General Counsel Services, some money for records requests, and a couple of other things, total of $7,914.95. Under Molitor and Associates for our government relations, the bill for September, $1,861.65. We did have a note with Inland Northwest Bank that was maturing that we had chosen to pay off, and that was in our budget that we were going to do that. So that note is now, I'm requesting money to pay that off. It's $244,224.24. The North Idaho Family Group, our second of two payments for that project of $7,500. A cost with Redevelopment Association of Idaho. Our membership dues was $750. And then our legislative fund contribution for fiscal year 16 is $10,000, so a total of $10,750. Range Northwest Inc., an invoice from them for the month, and it's $1,120. So you add up all of our bills for the month, it's $277,739.34, with the bulk of that being the payoff at the bank, Inland Northwest Bank, on one of our properties. It's the 712 Young Avenue property. Any questions or comments on the payables? Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, just need a motion.
Would entertain a motion to approve the financial reports and the payables.
So moved.
A second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those, any opposed? Motion carries.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rod. Next would be housing. Mr. Goodlander.
I don't have a report at this time. We have not held a meeting for probably a couple of months, and so there's nothing new to report at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Jordan, anything on parking?
I have a fairly short report, Mr. Chairman. See, there's not a lot of things to report, but they are looking at the Parking Commission, working on an ordinance, and then we're in the early stages. It's still being tweaked by legal a little bit, but on the ordinance to allow booting of cars that have a certain number of parking tickets. I don't think that's been decided on, but whether somebody has 4 tickets, 5 tickets that they've ignored and not paid, at some point they'd be subject to booting of their car, making it, incapacitating it to encourage them to pay their parking tickets. There's some people that have, 40 tickets, 50 tickets that they don't pay. So as I said, I don't think anyone's going to find their car booted next week downtown or anything, but that's something that's being worked on. We had some discussion about that at the October meeting, and it's going back to be worked on a little bit more by legal. And of course, that's something that'd have to go through City Council eventually, but that's probably the most interesting thing we had at our last meeting.
Any questions of Brad? So next would be Dave, Communications.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't have a whole bunch to report tonight. Just kind of give you a little bit of a brief summary. Our most recent communication strategy is basically wound up, or wound down, I should say. And Range is analyzing the web information as far as the views, length of time people are staying on there, how many pages, all of that sort of data for us to digest and process. And through the course of that, I'd anticipate next meeting of bringing to you all some information that discussed with Adam and with Eden about updating the educational video that talks about tax increment financing that we did over 2 years ago, and make that thing current as far as the name change and the currency of that. So I want to bring forward to you what the cost would be on that proposal and what the deliverables will be. So look for that next month. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, questions of Dave? Okay, jobs, Mick.
No report.
Tone Executive Director's report.
A couple items, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, if you could throw up the first slide there. Just want to review the tactical goals for the year-end FY15. I have copies here. So as you'll see on the screen, these are the tactical goals that the board had for the fiscal year 2015 that just wrapped up last month. Every year the board meets to discuss strategic goals, long-term goals for the agency, and each year they set short-term, one-year tactical goals to try to achieve those long-term strategic goals. So as you can see, we use a color coding scheme here. Green is good, yellow is not good, and red is bad. And blue means that we're punting or putting things on hold. So you'll see that looking at the goals that the board came forward with for 2015, most of them were achieved. We looked good on many fronts. And a couple we just need to kind of push off another year for extenuating circumstances. So overall, I think the board did very well in achieving their goals for fiscal 2015. Then the next item I'd like to share, and that there's no comments, is Jeff, if you can throw up 2016 goals. So the board does not rest very long, so these are the goals, the tactical goals for 2016 that are up on the screen and being passed around. You can see many of the themes are the same, a few different changes regarding the Finance Committee and the Jobs Committee, but the strategic vision hasn't altered much, just some different tactical goals to get us down the path. Obviously, we're looking good right now since we're only a couple weeks into the fiscal year, and I look forward to working with the board to achieve these goals as the year progresses. Entertain any questions you might have, but I just wanted to kind of give the board an update and the viewing audience an update on kind of where we at on the goals front.
Dave?
One of the things that we had talked about, we said as a goal, was maybe taking a look at the 2007 downtown parking review study. Is that something is it too early to start that discussion or that process as we analyze kind of where downtown has gone? Do we have enough, history with the parking realignment over here on front? At what point do we either move on from that idea, or do we update so we can analyze potential other parking needs in the future?
Tony, was that, we've done those assessments before. Have we done that on our own, or have we done that in partnership with the city?
The parking assessments in partnership with the city.
So maybe that's something Brad takes back and discusses with the parking commission? When it would be appropriate to revisit the parking study?
I would think that it would be a good time to do that, especially with the Memorial Mullen project coming on board. It'd probably be a good time to update that.
Do we work with the county on that? The county, as far as their campus goes?
I don't believe they've been a part of that in the past.
No.
They have a huge parking need on their campus.
I know Steve has had recent meetings with the commissioners on the potential for partnering on parking there at the county campus. Right?
Yeah, we certainly could approach the commissioners and see if they would like to be a part of that. They have done some parking studies simply on their campus to see what their needs are. But it would be a good idea to bring those folks in.
Okay, thank you.
And the second item I have, Mr. Chairman, is just for the viewing audience here, is that yesterday at the direction of city leadership, City of Coeur d'Alene Finance Director Troy Tymason invited Douglas Peterson of the Housing Company and Executive Director Burns, which is myself, to converse about the possibility of migrating the Housing Company's proposed workforce affordable housing project from the Midtown area to the old Federal Building block in downtown, which is the Federal blocks on 4th Street and Coeur d'Alene Avenue, where IgniteCDA and the city own property. The premise of this conversation was to explore the what-if possibilities of combining the Housing Company's workforce housing initiative with the parking structure IgniteCDA, in partnership with the city, has envisioned on that block for quite a while. So during the conversation we had yesterday, several scenarios were discussed. Mr. Peterson and the Housing Company are taking the conversation under advisement. Mr. Tymason at the city will be providing the Housing Company with a bit more information, and we'll continue the dialogue. But this is just an idea that has been brought forward to see if there's any type of rational combination of what's going on, what we propose on the Federal Building block, the old Federal Building block, in partnership with our parking initiative as well as the affordable housing initiative.
That was a nice segue by me, and I didn't even know this was coming, so sometimes you luck out. Sounds like parking is a needed issue to be studied, and the impact if this goes forward.
Mm-hmm. Tony, would the concept be to have parking underneath and the housing above that?
That's one concept. I mean, there's a myriad of possibilities that will be kind of thought through. Could be a separate structure from any type of parking, so not over top. So one of the issues we have is if we're looking long term, that if a parking structure is built there at a certain level, would it be wise not to cap it so that you could expand it in the next several decades if you need to, kind of like they did at the hospital, or not? Maybe it would make sense to put a building over top of the parking. So those ideas are being kicked around. But this is very raw information. It's just starting to happen, so we don't have a lot of context yet.
Deanna.
For a point of clarification, the Housing Committee has not been involved in those discussions.
Correct. And we're just getting them started. Brad.
Make one quick comment, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a lot of merit to this. There's, as many of us have seen, have been down to Boise, there's models for this as examples in Boise where they've partnered and done joint parking and multi-story development. Now, whether this should be workforce housing, market rent, condos, senior housing, I don't know, but that'll come down the road. But I think there's a lot of merit to studying this, and maybe there should be more partners besides Idaho Housing in it. But so I'm glad you're looking at that. I think we need to get the parking garage going. And this might be one of the players that can get it off the ground.
How was the meeting left yesterday? Who's taking what for action or anything?
The next step would be Mr. Tymason will provide more information on the geography to the Housing Company. Then we'll all get back together and continue the dialogue.
Okay.
As you know, we have some mixed ownership issues on that block. We don't have the entire block tied
Yeah.
up. And the city owns a big chunk of that land as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to
I
this.
think the county still has the federal building, correct?
Correct.
Which kind of dovetails into the conversation about the parking with the county. Okay. I think we need to have discussions with them, Steve. If we haven't about parking, we need to include them or give them the opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Tom?
Progressive.
So, board commissioner comments. I would just like to respond to the comment made earlier at the public comment. You know, in all my years on the board, there's never been a decision made at a committee level that didn't get well vetted at the board level. Decisions do not get made at the committee level. Information is gathered. So I just want to make that clear to the public that that's not going on as was alluded to. I think there could be some merit to looking at our committee structure and how we operate with those meetings. It does complicate things in terms of where we meet, how we notice them. But the bottom line is that we are compliant, I think, and we do not make decisions at the committee level. As you can see from just the presentations we had earlier tonight, this is not a board that simply rubber stamps something someone says. We dive into it, and that will continue to happen. So, any other commissioner comments? Public comments. Ms. Snedeker, welcome.
Full call.
Sorry about that.
I'm not going to move around here. Susie Snedeker, I just want to thank you for cleaning the parking lot. Mr. Burns? On 3rd Street, Midtown, it looks very nice. I'm sure you'll be cleaning it one more time as the leaves are dropping, but for now the weeds are gone, the debris is gone, and it looks very nice. Thank you so much for paying attention to our neighborhood in this issue.
Thank you, Susan. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we have, Chair would entertain a motion for executive session under Idaho Code Section 672345 Sub 1, Subsection B, to consider the evaluation of the IgniteCDA Executive Director, and that requires a roll call.
So moved.
So is there a second?
Yes.
Moved and seconded, roll call.
Hoskins? Aye. Caldwell?
Aye.
Harmon?
Yes.
Whitmire?
Yes.
Hatcher?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Jordan?
Yes.
Goodlander?
Yes.
Okay, we are in executive session.